Hey everybody, this is Amos St. John, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Coffeehouse Conversations podcast. On my last episode, I shared about my personal journey dealing with balancing humility with understanding my value and my self-worth. And if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you go back and check it out, and make sure you subscribe and share it with a friend or two or three or a million. But I would truly appreciate it. Okay. Now today I have a special guest. It's somebody very dear to me for the past 15 plus years or so. Her name is Jasmine, and I'm so fortunate to be her hubby.
Oh my gosh.
Of almost 9 years, and we are parents to a beautiful 5-year-old toddler girl, Gracie. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Jasmine.
Hey, everybody. I don't know why he introduced me like it's the first day at school, but hey, I am Jasmine St. John. I am definitely his wife of 9 years. Very excited about Amos and this podcast. So as he said, please subscribe. I promise you, even though I am married to him, it is absolutely wonderful. I have subscribed and I listen. So I encourage you to do the same.
Awesome. Everything is awesome. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have a toddler and he's just going in.
Let go. Sorry. All right. Today we're going to talk about finding the right mate in today's culture. From my perspective, and Jasmine has shared from her perspective. Now, we're not experts. Now, we're not claiming to be experts. We only could speak from our experiences and what worked for us for the past 15 years. We've had our highs. We had our lows. We had more highs than lows, thank God. But how do you navigate, and what are certain key factors and key important things to help you finding the right mate? And so, Jasmine, share what's our story? Before we get to that, let's talk about why we started this podcast concerning, finding the right mate.
I think we're passionate about relationships. I think it's something that we always, if you have come to our house, we sit around and talk about. Mm-hmm. I feel like when people share their stories, it's the best way that other people can glean from them. It's definitely not a how-to, but sometimes when you hear how other people did it, you can pull things from it and then apply it to your own life or your own relationship, and not just dating relationships, but friendships mm-hmm. and things of that nature. So that's kind of why we decided to talk about this on this particular podcast, because it's something near and dear to our heart. True. And I think love. I think we love to see other people win at love and marriage. And so we hope that we share something that is helpful to you. Yep. Today's we're going to start off by kind of sharing with you a little bit of a story, or actually this happened in real life, where we were sitting around the kitchen and I was talking to my sister, and a couple of her friends were over that particular day. We were in Maryland. And we were probably home for the holiday, and she had just ended a long-term relationship with somebody I'm not going to name. And she was kind of just asking me as a big sister, why do relationships fail even when they look like they're going to be successful? Because she really did think that at the end of that relationship, it was going to end in marriage, and it did not. And she talks, of course, in length about that in her book. That she wrote.
Game. Go Joy Marie McKenzie.
So get The Engagement Game by Joy Marie McKenzie. It's a lot of our conversation with her as well as like tips and things of that nature is in that book. It's not a how-to as well, but it's just her story. And so as we were talking, my husband was in the other room and came over and kind of heard part of the conversation and decided to share the male perspective. And that's kind of what brought to the limelight the title for today's podcast, which is
Superman versus Clark Kent.
And what does that mean?
Well, a couple of years ago, I just really reflected and really came up with this thought of how men always like to share their best selves in order to attract a mate, and I am, guilty of that. And it's a great thing. We want to be Superman, our gifts, our talents, our great sides, our great attributes. But there's also another side. There's also the Clark Kent. And if we were to find the right mate, with all our gifts and attract them and all our, our swag. We with the Superman swag, we get them. Now, I think where I've seen a lot of men fail is they fail to share their Clark Kent side, the more human, normal, the lows, the more emotional side, in order to balance out. Like, you know what, we're not perfect, but we're all subject to error. We're subject to failure. We're subject to being in our low moments. To balance out the things about us. So not enough men share their Clark Kent side, but too many men share too much of their Superman side. There's never a balance. So I think in order to achieve a healthy friendship, relationship, whatever, which can possibly lead to marriage, is always important for a male to always share their both attributes, the good and the bad, and eventually the ugly. But I think it's important to understand, like, okay, it ain't all about just being Superman. You have to share a little bit of that Clark Kent, and knowing that, you know what, yeah, I am human. I have flaws, and all this perfection that I initially showed to you is also there is also another side. So it's important, as great as we can share our Superman side, but it's also great that we can also display our Clark Kent side to give a good balance, a good perspective. So as you grow together, you're able to deal with the ebbs and flows of what life presents itself. So that's the reason why I shared it at that moment concerning I don't see enough men sharing their Clark Kent side. And you know what? And sometimes it's not totally their fault. I think it's their upbringing. Their father may have showed them, hey, you got to be strong. You got to be able to lift cars and flip it upside down, and do all this, and never share with them, like, yo, I do hurt. Mm-hmm. I do fail. And it's not always about winning all the time. It's also about understanding that, you know what, I am subject to error as a man. So, you got to be able to show that. And I felt at that time when I shared it, not enough men are sharing their Clark Kent side.
I will say, though, it's probably because of the intentionality behind at least some dating relationships. Mm-hmm. So unless you feel safe in the relationship, you're not really going to show the Clark Kent side. And then, or some men may feel like women don't deserve that because it's not what they're here for. True. So I think depending upon how the relationship begins, or even as it's evolving, communicating how it's changing, and sharing with that person that you trust them enough to be vulnerable without judgment, is going to allow men to be a little bit more Clark Kent and feel like they don't have to be Superman. Yeah.
I think for me, I can speak from my experience in dating you. I think one of the greatest signs that we had a bright future when we first met was that you were so cool. Like, it was not like, hey, we're not trying to impress. Like, it was great. I'm still going to impress and show you my, but it really didn't matter. It was like, yo, I just enjoy you as a person. You had a great personality. I'm just speaking, based on our vibe. Like, you were just like, yo, just be yourself. You don't have to be, put on. Like, and I'm naturally I do believe in chivalry, so I'm always opening the doors and just
15 years later,
I'm still doing. I'm thankful for that. So it was never part of my Superman act to open the door and be like that. That was just the way I am. And so, but it didn't matter for you. You was just like, yo, let's just be around each other. And I think that was that provided an atmosphere for me to feel safe.
Well, we talked about it when we first started dating. My intentionality in meeting you, though, was to be friends. You know what I'm saying? So the whole, friends and dating, because we did go out on dates and share, those moments. But it was more so for me, I think you get tired after a certain point and you start to be able to see through a lot of the fake facade of dating. Yeah. And so after you've gone on the same pattern of, well, pick me up in whatever kind of car and take me to whatever kind of restaurant and all that other stuff. And at the end, you leave with not knowing anything about the person. After a while, that gets old. And so when we first met, we were very intentional about, okay, well, I like you and you like me, but what does that mean and where is this going to go? And we talked a little bit more in depth about who we were as people because I really could care, honestly, less about whatever you were trying to show me as far as all of that. I think also because when we started dating, it was already at a point where it was like, I have everything. If I really, really wanted it, I could get it for myself, kind of thing.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. But so I didn't really want to put that pressure on you to do that for me. And even now, I think it's kind of shared in that way. But nah, I didn't want to see Superman. And I think that was my way of just kind of showing or reflecting what I wanted. I showed you a lot of Clark Kent of me. Because I don't think it just applies to men. I think it applies to women as well. Because everybody wants to put their best foot forward. So the more that I showed you that I'm not whoever people say I am, the more you showed me who you were as well. So,
well, I think also I felt that you can handle Clark Kent. You know, I think Superman by itself is somewhat, he's kind of self-sustained.
Yeah.
Like being Superman, I was like, you know, I could, you know, fly over buildings, leap over tall buildings, and all that other great things. So that's kind of on its own thing. But Clark Kent requires a little bit more tenderness, TLC, vulnerability. So I felt that you can handle that and not judge me.
Yeah.
And account it against me. And I think that was a great indication to knowing that we had a bright future, because, you know, I've been in situations where they didn't handle Clark Kent well, and it just really was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Because it was more of, man, you know, my knight in shining armor is no longer that. It's now I feel like a janitor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you were able to handle it and not judge me. And I think that's a great, important thing, that as you grow together in friendship and dating, it's important that to gauge if they can handle all aspects of you. And that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight.
Surely.
But there are indications as time progresses that they can handle it and to move forward. And so it's always important to feel those signs that, you know, can we talk as friends? Let's lay aside the title of dating, girlfriend and boyfriend, and let's talk as friends. Like, what's going on? Like, and not judge each other. And I think that's one of our greatest strengths to this day, because we're able to navigate through some lows, because we're able to say, okay, let's lay aside our titles.
Yeah.
And let's talk as friends. Like, you good? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not apply it to our titles.
But you're my, you're
yeah,
my spouse.
yeah.
You
We're
should
able
talk
to
me or
not
ask
take
me
it
that
personal.
question.
Like,
Yeah.
let's remove the titles and let's get to the foundation. Like, yo, you good? Like, are you good? Like, that's why I think friendship is so important.
Yeah.
Get to know the person that you are planning to have a future with. And so I think that was a great foundational jewel for us in our growing together in the last 15 years. Because if we didn't have that, I think it would create a lot of mystery and a lot of gray.
Well, I would say to get to that place, we asked a lot of questions, and we asked a lot of questions that we probably wouldn't ask anybody else. And they come over time. And if I were to, I don't know, share advice, but not really, you don't have to take it seriously, but part of it is we all have some kind of mystery list in our head.
True.
As to what we're looking for in a mate. And even if you are going into a relationship as a friend or as a dating partner, there's something in the back of your head that you're checking boxes off of, like, oh, is he tall, dark, handsome, whatever have you. And when those things don't match, I feel like that's how much longer the facade will be up.
Oh. Wow.
And then also, as they do not match, self-evaluation doesn't take place. And so you do find yourself in a situation longer than you intended to be in, because you didn't walk away when it didn't really meet. Like, for example, if faith is something important to you, but this person isn't saved, then you jump into salvation mode. Like, well, we're going to church and I'm gonna help you. And like, well, if it doesn't match, it doesn't match for you. Don't force it. Or if you like green and they like blue, if that's important to you, or whatever the case is, you like to travel and they don't, or they like to go out and you like to stay home. Those are minor things, but at the same time, if they're on your list of non-negotiables, those can become major roadblocks. And the way that you can discover those roadblocks for yourself is by asking the right questions and not just going along to get along and oh, but he's going to take me out. Well, who cares about the dinner if you're sitting across from somebody that's not that, like, at the end of the day, you're just wasting time.
Yeah. And for some people, I think I observe just in society that people don't. I guess they find joy in wasting time.
I don't. I don't have time to waste,
yeah.
and I think that's our background and the way we were raised.
Straight to the cuss. And I think upbringing also plays a huge part in the health of it all, because you grew up in a very solid household, mom and dad, brother, sister, and so did I. I had a mom and dad, brother and sisters, and so we're understanding how that dynamic works, and when it comes to just understanding in life, in growing together, and so we had that in common, and I think that helped our strength and our health.
Well,
and our
two-parent
connection.
family aside, our parents are also people who aren't the kind to waste time.
Truth.
They take advantage of every minute of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you know that you don't have an infinite amount of time, and you know that you probably want to be married or in a long-term relationship, wasting time with people who are either just sucking up your space or energy, or you're not interested in all that other stuff, is just eating away at your purpose in regards to, where God wants you to be in life. So
that's true. And I agree. And for me, I am so thankful that my parents gave that example of a healthy, and like they argued a little bit in front of me, so I was able to see, like, okay, it's not all about roses and all the beautiness of marriage or relationship. There is also the other part, the not so happy side. Yeah. And so with us coming together, I didn't come in with the mindset of like it's gonna be always perfect.
Yeah.
And so I was able to gauge, like, you know what, can I go to war with her? And no. I mean, not literally, but I mean, can we really like go there and survive?
Yeah.
And so that was a major thing. And because I was able to see that, in marriages, there's going to be war. There's going to be some tough times. And that's truly the test of how this can be long-term. So the fact that we had a pretty strong family upbringings, it's not supposed to be perfect. So we didn't have the perfect upbringing. I don't think anyone has, no. But we had very healthy upbringings, and it really helped. Now, what happens to those who may not have the healthiest upbringings? That's
it's just going to shape their perspective a little bit differently. Yeah. And just because you come from one or the other doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work. Mm-hmm. When the two come together, it's just being honest about what that informs your relationship to be. Because even though like your experience is that you saw your parents fight in front of you or argue, let's say argue because it's not physical, but it's just like they had disagreements in front of you, and then they also made up in front of you. Where my experience was a little different, just because one of working dynamic and my parents working at different hours and things of that nature, but they really rarely ever, if ever, argued in front of me. But I did see the art of compromise. And so knowing their story of their relationship over the years, even before children, and now, like, my dad was a star, NBA player, and then the roles reversed, and my mom is doing what she's doing, pastoring and bishop and all that. So the roles reversed, but compromise is compromise. So it doesn't really matter whether an argument exists or not. There's somebody who has to give or somebody who has to take. So.
And you fall into our next episode about marriage, but I'll give it.
But we've mastered that in a way that works for us because we practice that in our relationship.
True. Yeah.
One of the main things that we talked about when we got together, as far as titles are concerned, was that we're very careful with our words.
Truth.
We never let arguments go beyond what we can't take back. And so it was like, look. You break up, that's it. Like, I'm not playing no games. We're not breaking up to make up. You have to be, which forces you to be mindful about the person that you're talking to, even when you're upset.
True.
So,
for me, when we talk about, dating, it's scary to see now. Like, when we were dating, there wasn't Instagram.
Thank the Lord.
There wasn't really
no Facebook existed.
There was not online dating. And I asked myself, I feel
we barely
sorry.
had instant messages. That's all we had.
Like the sidekicks.
All we had was instant messenger and away messages. That was it.
And so there was a certain simplicity when it comes
Yeah.
to access, and
You either had my
now
number or you didn't.
how more intense it is now with with Instagrams, all that social media and online dating that I'm totally foreign to. I have no clue what
Yeah.
Tinder is like, whatever that is, and it's a concern because I'm like, yo, like people
That's
can
all.
present anything.
That's all they got. It's
A
Superman
profile
presentations.
picture, it can be anything. It can be photoshopped, anything. It doesn't really show the true person, and so you don't have much to work with, and it's like you got to make a big judgment
You have more
based
effort.
on
Yeah.
a picture, not a conversation. We had the advantage of a conversation
Yeah.
back in the days. Like it wasn't a profile picture and swipe. It was meet me here at the safe space
Right.
and let's talk. And but nowadays there's a lot more to it, and I'm like, man, like the rules have changed.
The rules have drastically changed. Like out of my girl group,
Yeah.
I'm the only one I believe that got married before social,
Mm.
and was in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
prior to social media.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have 3 friends I know of that are married because they met someone online,
Wow.
strictly online, like
Wow.
didn't know them before
Wow.
anything. And so when they do ask, I legit have to say, device aside, I don't know anything about how you met,
Mm-hmm.
but the rules are as far as engagement and trying to get to know still kind of remain the same. So
I would love to have some guests who met online and kind of get their perspective, like, because I don't have that perspective of online dating and how the rules have changed and how does that work, and the benefits or the challenges about it, all of
drawbacks.
that. And so hopefully somebody will respond and say, hey,
If y'all want to come talk about it, come on.
holler at me.
But
But
also it's like not just how you met, it's the whole public dating, relationship status changing, or
yeah,
you got so many more people who can make comments or
oh,
give advice
is
just
so
based
true.
on your interaction in a picture or how close you're sitting next to your boo or whatever, or you didn't post him
yeah.
in 7 months. Are y'all still together? And all these
Whew.
inquisitive people. And it's just like, I'm thankful. I don't know about anybody else that we did not have to experience
True.
that, because of the fact that would be more pressure to have to put on for not just you and trying to get to know who you are, but now I got to put on for my friends to say like, oh, dating life is amazing, or he's amazing, or we went here, and it's like a whole show. And at the
Hashtag
end
goals.
right, and at the end of it, you're left with what?
Yeah.
Now, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I am thankful that we have substance. Like there is substances. Our relationship is substantive. It's not superficial.
Yeah.
And so I think it allows us to navigate through the different times we're in. Like if we lived in the Facebook era where everything was about status and likes and don't likes, or Instagram, like I think it'll be very difficult to build what that powerful word called trust.
Yeah.
And so like because you're playing with a very strange perspective when it comes to online, because you're looking at this screen and I talk about manipulated images, and it speaks a story, and the story impacts you based on your perspective and your upbringing. Like if you've been hurt before, or you've been you've been damaged based on the past, you'll look at stuff based from that perspective of being damaged and hurt, and you have no room to correct it because you've already made your assumption
Right.
and acted upon it. Versus back in the days, you had to have conversation. You'll assume and you feel some kind of way, but you'll ask a question like, "Yo, what's up with that?" Or you may not have known because it's not posted online. So, but it was just a lot of room to work things out and not move on assumption. Now it's like, oh, I saw you at the club.
You was all busy. You couldn't call me back. All that stuff.
And
like,
it's just it just complicates things. And so I am thankful that we have established a strong foundation pre social media. I mean, and nothing against people who have done it.
Yeah, because now that's all there is,
That's the
and
reality,
not to say that it's impossible, but it's to encourage you to say you have to be that much more honest offline.
Yeah.
And online, be responsible.
True.
If your intentionality is to really partner with somebody or date somebody and be serious about someone, because of the fact that At the end of the day, there are real people behind those profiles,
Yes.
and it will blow up in your face the
True.
least amount of honest that you are.
Yeah.
You have to build a strong foundation, and the only way to do that is by being vulnerable, being open, and just being honest. Just communicate, and that's practiced off the phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That whole Clark Kent revelation for me was huge because it really summarized my experience, like how I felt when I was with you. I was like, wow, I can just, it's not about my talent of being an artist or musician. Like, she could care less about Superman. She could care less about Superman. She really cared about Clark Kent. Yeah. That was the attraction. And that's basically the point I'm driving is, you know, let that person get to know the real you. And from there, I believe that's where the strong foundation is. The gifts, the talent, the skill set, the education, all that stuff is amazing. That's great. That's Superman, Superwoman. But also there's another side. There's the sensitive side, the challenge side that, you know, that have gone through some challenges in their life, and that honest, transparent side. And I know it's difficult for a lot of people to practice transparency, but I can tell you there is such a healing in that aspect of being transparent in your friendships, in your relationships, and then on to your marriages, because transparency will relieve the mystery when in your absence.
Yeah.
And so because you know this person 100 grand, like this is how they are. There's no mystery about that. And so being transparent is so important. So I'm thankful that I was able to practice this whole Clark Kent and not just be Superman. Like I'm you know, she was impressed seeing me playing in the band, like, you know, doing that. But who am I away from my instrument? Who am I away from my talent was very key. And so I do believe in dealing with Superman versus Clark Kent. You have to find that balance in knowing that, okay, not just be all this great things, but also be the most transparent things. And so
I think that's probably what made me like you even more, I guess you could say. I was going to say love, but it's a little early. Is your transparency. Yeah. I grew up in a fishbowl. Everybody, I felt like everybody knew me or knew who my mom was or knew who my dad was or knew who my grandmother was. And so I met a lot of fake friends in my experience. And so just meeting people in general who are willing to be transparent with me, which made me safe to be transparent with them. Like, all them people aside, who am I? What does that look like? Or who do I want to be? And can trust you with that. Is what made me know that I was definitely dating or seeking the right person.
I think that was the spark.
Yeah.
For me too, because, you know, at the time I was a very high profile position.
Yeah, you still are. Humble, come on now.
I'm going to balance my humility and not be unbalanced.
Right. Amos was playing at one of the biggest mega churches when I met him. I was there too. And so that's just the reality of where we were at that point. Yeah. And Amos was touring overseas and stuff like that. So please, whatever. So,
I mean, but when the lights are turned off, the instruments are turned off, and the moment is gone, I wanted to be with somebody who could enjoy me and my company. Like, we love movies.
We do. We love to laugh together.
Yeah, we enjoy that time. And so that was a spark. Like, the fact that you can enjoy me outside of my element.
Right.
And not have to talk about it. We barely talked about anything. It's more of like, man, did you see that comedy? Like, we love Will Ferrell movies. We love, you know, all these movies. So we enjoyed normal things and not have to be put, like, turned on. Like, we don't have to be on.
I didn't have to mind my words or what I wanted to say. I didn't have to adjust my likes to your likes. I didn't have to do any of that. Yeah. And that's how I kind of knew, like, for sure, you were at least somebody worth keeping around. Because I could be myself, and I felt like you could be yourself. And I knew exactly when, you knew for sure I could roll with you as far as like being your girl, is when your dad called you and you started speaking in Creole. So if everybody don't know,
Oh, yes, I do speak fluent
he
Creole.
talked about in the
Sac
previous
passe.
podcast that he's Haitian and Dominican,
Yeah.
and Amos for the longest time living in Baltimore
Yeah.
never shared, even though his last name is definitely Haitian, that he was first generation. I just thought he was African American. I have no idea. You know what I mean? I had never met anybody
Yeah.
that was from Haiti, and
Yeah.
then his dad called, who only speaks or spoke at the time because his father has passed, Creole.
Mm-hmm.
And Amos just went off and telling him about stuff. Now I spoke French, so I can kind of pick up a little bit, and that's how I knew that you were safe with me.
Yeah.
In regards to sharing things that you didn't share with other people,
Yeah.
because I had never, and I had at this point been your friend for like 3 years,
Yeah.
had never, and I was like, okay, I
The
see
son-
you.
That's cool. I mean, I think for me, you felt comfortable, especially because I know, like I said, you lived in a bubble because of your parents. When I met your parents and in a normal environment outside of church, and it was a very it was a great moment because I mean I know your mother's
Yeah.
a great icon, and so but I get to meet her as your mother
Yeah,
and
I
not
don't
as
think
the
I
icon,
ever-
and it was cool. Like I was just I had a little starstruck then. I mean, but I kept it cool. You know what I'm saying? But
Oh my gosh.
it was the fact that y'all were just cool. The family embraced me, and that was huge. And I felt till this day it's like family.
Yeah.
And so I am thankful for that experience and knowing that I was embraced as just being normal, not a fan or a supporter, but I was just your friend. And
Yeah.
so it goes far in having that compatibility in both elements to know that this can be a long-term journey together. And so I'm just thankful that we had those experiences. Now, like I said, we're not experts.
Never.
We don't know it all, but we only can speak from our experiences of what has
Mm-hmm.
helped us to navigate for the last 15 years. Now, there's people that may know more because they've been together longer, but I know for us, this is what works. This is what keeps us moving through, transitioning from one state to another. I mean, that's a very tough thing to do
Yeah.
as a couple. And we were fortunate to really navigate through that. And it was smooth, because I think all that foundational aspects of communication, transparency, understanding, seeing, being able to lay aside our titles as husband and wife, girlfriend and boyfriend, and just be like, Jasmine a friend, Amos the friend, what's up, girl? What's good? And having those moments balances when we have to operate in our titles as husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend. I think it's
I
always
think
good.
the title for me is just the added bonus. Does that make
Okay.
sense? It's the
Okay.
icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And it really doesn't bring anything to the table. It just allows other people to identify who I am to you.
True.
But everything else is what makes me your wife.
Function.
Does
Yeah.
that make
Yeah,
sense?
I get it.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So this is part one. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about marriage and how it's been for us for the last year and the elements that has allowed us to really navigate through the seasons of life. And, because we were married and my father passed away and, dealing with that and just understanding how you deal with the different seasons thus far. And I know
Yeah.
her parents has been married 50 years.
Yep.
My parents were married 32 years before my mother passed. And so, we seen from our perspective how they navigate through that and for the longevity. Because nowadays we don't have many examples of long marriages. Like
Yeah.
with that guy from Amazon, they just divorced for like a gazillion $billion.
Right. And they both still rich.
And so, but that's the example we have now. Like people are amicably separating.
Yeah,
And
and if
that-
we can
and,
offer the other perspective
perspective,
of you can find the mate, you can love the person,
Mm-hmm.
you can continue to work out life together, and you can stay married.
Yep.
And that's what I hope that we can offer. I don't know
Yes.
about
So,
anybody else.
on the next podcast. So stay tuned, subscribe. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
and-
for having me.
Listen, girl, you're the bomb.com. You are the bomb. I love you. And I'm so thankful that you have pushed me to do this.
Yes,
And you're
I'm
still
glad
pushing
that you
me.
did it. Yes,
And I'm glad that I'm doing it because, I mean, And that's the other thing about having a right mate, having somebody to push you to your potential, push you beyond your potential. And you're definitely that. And I pray that I can be reciprocated and push you to your beyond your potential. So again, we have more to talk about on our next podcast about married life. But I'm so hopefully we've shared some nuggets concerning our walk and when we were friends and dating and transitioning into long-term commitment. So again, thank you for tuning in to the Coffeehouse Conversations podcast. Subscribe, leave a comment, rating, make sure all that stuff helps. So please follow us on social media, and we hopefully will see you soon. Okay? And until again, thank you.